Three, two, okay. I was going to do my countdown, but I guess I'm not going to do my countdown. I hit record automatically, so so everybody,
Well,
welcome to Wonderful World of Weirdness, and today I'm doing our third episode in a series called Into the Abyss. What we are talking about here is psychotropics and spiritual experiences. I wanted to have more people here, but nobody showed up except for Robot, which is fine because Robot is an encyclopedia when it comes to drugs. So there, and he's also big on spiritual experiences, and
they call me a psychonaut, you
yeah,
know.
a psychonaut.
It's like an astronaut for drugs.
So I think we can still put together a pretty good show, and I think that a lot of people would be interested in hearing about this. To be honest with you, so with that, Robot wanted to tell kind of a history. Now, is it the history on DMT?
Yeah, so that's gonna be our focus, right? Is DMT specifically?
Well, psychotropics is what I was
Oh,
gonna
oh, you
get,
want to generalize it over all of them?
but I do want to focus a little bit on DMT,
Okay.
because there's a lot of misconceptions about DMT that people should know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for
And
sure,
especially
for
when it
sure.
comes to the chemical aspects, what's taking place there. So, but
All right. Well, it's important first of all to know that before we knew of these substances as psychotropics or psychomimetics, as they call it in medicine, which means just mimicking a psychotic experience, they were actually used as spiritual compounds in tribal cultures in ancient times, right? And we have traditions from all around the world that have used psychedelics. Also, plant-based psychedelics, by the way, is known as entheogens these days. Entheogen comes from the Latin terms that means creating or generating the God within. Entheogen, okay. I might want to just also show you guys, I've got a group on Minds dedicated to this topic. It is called Entheogenic Portal. Let me just get it up for you. And entheogens um, have been used in South America since at least 10,000 years ago, in the form of in various forms. Whether it's mushrooms or uh, ayahuasca or toad or cactus. There's literally hundreds of different types of psychedelics in nature in the Amazon. Um, uh, and in this group we've got in mind that we've posted a few books there as well that enumerates all the different plants and stuff like that, so you guys can explore for yourselves. Um, I'll get it up in a few minutes. But basically, before DMT was known as DMT, it was known as ayahuasca. Okay, because in South America, there grows two plants that needs to be cooked up together in order to make a psychoactive brew that you can drink and have the DMT experience. The thing with DMT is your body naturally produces DMT, so it's actually more of like a hormone, actually. So your body needs a really good way to regulate it. So it breaks it down really easily. Okay, so if you eat a plant with DMT in it, it's going to break down in your stomach in seconds. And the reason for that is there's an enzyme in your stomach called uh, uh, what's it called? Skip my mind now. Uh, anyway, it'll come to me in a second.
All right.
There's an enzyme in your stomach that man, I should know this. That breaks down DMT, or it breaks down all amine compounds, right? And uh, that's like monoamine, not transferase, monoamine oxidase. That's it, monoamine oxidase. Okay, that's the enzyme. I'll even look it up for you.
Just keep on going with what you're talking about, man. We can get to that later whenever I'm talking.
But anyway, so like this enzyme breaks down DMT as well as all other neurotransmitters and things like that in your
Hmm.
stomach and in your blood. The reason for that is just so that it can maintain your neurotransmitter levels at a really, because it's a really like sensitive thing, right? It maintains it in a very tight levels in your blood. And you don't want to suddenly eat a plant with DMT in it and then start hallucinating, right? So your body has developed ways to break it down and uh, keep you sane, basically. Um, I'll bring it up on the screen here. I don't know if you can see it. Um,
Let me
can
see.
you see my screen, by the way?
Yeah, I see it. It's monoamine oxidase.
Yeah. So the the active ingredient in ayahuasca is DMT, but the thing that activates the DMT is actually a monoamine oxidase inhibitor called Banisteriopsis carpi or chacruna. Sorry, Banisteriopsis carpi. This is this um, vine. You can, I'll click on this. You can see here the vine is these like woody bits.
Hmm.
Inside those woody bits is a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, and that actually prevents your stomach from breaking down the DMT. Okay, and the DMT is in these green leaves. Okay, which is the chacruna or the Psychotria viridis. This is the other plant. And it's kind of like a coffee plant in South America. And if you brew those two together, it makes the DMT orally active, and you can actually drink it. And it lasts for up to 6 to 8 hours if you drink it. But in more modern times, people have discovered that DMT is an indole alkaloid, and it is able to be extracted through acid-base extractions, and we can purify it into its pure form, which is now known as DMT, or N,N-dimethyltryptamine,
Yeah,
right?
that's kind of the procedure that I'm wanting to get into later on with
Yeah, yeah.
with the newer
So,
stuff. So
before we go into that, interesting story, and I just found this out by chance talking to people as I was like traveling around the world. Australia also has its own DMT, ancient DMT traditions with the Aboriginal people in Australia, and like in ancient times, certain acacia trees. Uh, contain this DMT, and they used to trade the bark and the leaves from these trees between tribes over really really long distances, right? And in some places, the DMT is so strong in the acacia tree that they could like peel open the roots and like actually like find these red veins of DMT in there and smoke them. And there's other parts of the country where, like up north, northeast, where they would, when they want to wed a woman into the tribe from another tribe, they would hollow out an acacia tree's trunk and make like a canoe out of it, and then they would fill it up with water. Sorry, first before they fill it up with water, they'd bash these pandanus tree fruits in there, which is the monoamine oxidase inhibitor. But it's like a certain variety, this corkscrew variety, and they'd bash it in there, and then they'd fill it up with water and let it sit for 2 weeks. And the DMT would infuse into the brew, and they would, yeah, have like a wedding ceremony and drink this DMT brew in Australia as well. Um, so, yeah, that's very interesting, and I will also remind you guys that Moses and the burning bush. It has been said that when he went up on the mountain in Mount Sinai to talk with God, supposed God, uh, that was an acacia tree that was on fire, right? And that makes that brings the question up, right? Whether it's whether old Moses was actually fucking tripping balls
Now,
back in
you
biblical times.
you had something interesting up on the last screen that I do want to talk with you about on there. It mentions THH. Okay, like can you scroll back or go back to the last page, down towards
Uh,
down towards the
Down.
bottom in yeah, right here where it says THH is in where is it? No, it's the one. I think you went back one extra page or something.
THH.
Yeah, like
I've never.
hit your arrow going to the next page forward. I think you skipped it.
This is the only page I've
Oh,
been
yeah,
on.
this is it. You're right. It mentions it as yeah, there it is. There it is. Um,
But here
d-
about monoamine oxidases.
yeah. There's a part in there where it's mentioning.
That,
Oh, down. Go down.
yeah, so that's actually.
There it is, right
What were
here.
you going to ask, sorry?
Now it says right here, although orally inactive and B copy, it is rich on hamala alkaloids such as harmine, harmaline, and
Yes.
tetrodrohamine, which is THH.
Tetrahydroharmaline. Yeah.
Now, I've also heard of THF being used as well for as a solvent when it comes to the procedure. Now,
We'll
do,
get to that. We'll get to that. But
but
that's
do
skipping
you know
ahead a little
much
bit.
about
But
do you know much
I
about?
know a lot about that. I know a lot about that, and I
Okay,
will talk to you about it in a second. But you just mentioned something. These harmalines, right?
yeah,
This is a massively underrated aspect of this whole DMT discussion because these compounds are actually quite powerful and they're really useful as well in terms of sort of self medication or they used to use them as antidepressants and things like this in medicine, but the ancient shamans also used them in their ayahuasca brews, right?
hmm
And um, you can find them in this thing called Syrian rue, and you can find them in large quantities in there, which comes from Iraq, I think. And it's actually you can extract the same compounds from that you can get from ayahuasca, and so you could do your own DMT brew with this Pagnum harmala seeds, which are really, really cheap and really, really abundant. um, you know, and they are mega strong. And if you have a little bit of this in a tea before you smoke or drink DMT, it'll make your DMT a lot stronger, basically, right? Now, they say there's like a slightly different quality to the ayahuasca harmalines, namely the tetrahydroharmaline, because there's only harmine and harmaline in this one, not the TTH. But personally, I've done both, and I don't find a huge difference. Like
Hmm.
they both bloody. I've had amazing experiences on just Hamala like this, and I highly rate it. Highly rate it.
Well, I know, like
Uh,
with THF, that's only a solvent. You know what I'm saying? So, like, what is the
THF.
yeah,
I, I,
THF?
I think you better check that because I've never. I don't think that's what. What's the full name?
Let me see. It has to do with basically it's the procedure of when you. Well, we were going to talk about it later. It's the procedure of when you use methyl groups like the CH3 and all that.
CH. Are we talking about the extraction process
Yes.
or what?
What it is basically uh, tryptamine. Okay, when it oxidizes, it can oxidize easy on shelves or anything, and most of the time, you can get it off of any pharmaceutical shelf. Okay,
Okay. Okay.
so
Okay.
so what you do is when it's oxidized like that, it has a tendency of turning orange or brown in color, and it needs to be recrystallized. And to do that, you have to boil it usually in heptane or hexane.
Well, no, wait. Are you talking about synthesis or are you talking about extraction?
Oxidizing and then extraction. Yeah, it would basically be the procedure of recrystallizing it. Okay, and
Okay, but that's three different things you're talking about. Let's
right.
start from the beginning. Okay. Um, there's there's two different ways to get DMT. You're either extracting it from a plant or you're synthesizing it from chemicals, right?
Yeah.
The synthesizing from chemicals thing is quite difficult. I know of people that have done it, and it can be done, but it's you need like deep chemical knowledge to be able to do that, and like proper chem sets and stuff like that. Extraction is what most people go for. Extraction from plants, right? So we get our plant material sources. Some people, you know, order stuff from the Amazon. I don't recommend doing that because they tend to pillage. Like, we can't have the whole world pillaging one spot. I recommend people start growing their own plants, if they're going to be extracting it, at the very least, as a gift back to nature, because we can't all just like pillage nature because then there'll be nothing left. That's
Hmm.
why I've actually stopped taking it and doing it because too many people got too greedy. And anyway, so with the extraction process, the first thing to know is you need to have safety equipment, especially eye goggles, right?
Hmm.
Because you don't want to splash some of these chemicals in your eyes, you'll go blind straight away. That's the most important thing. Solvents that are used, like, so these are DMT alkaloid, okay,
No.
it's more, it's got a longer shelf life when it's in its acidic form
Hmm.
compared to when it's in its free base form. Do you know what I mean by those terms? It's
What?
like when the pH acidity is less than what was it? Less than what's neutral again? pH neutral is
Um.
um, 7, isn't it?
Hmm.
7.
I
Uh,
think so.
so
It,
yeah,
it
so
might
when
be
it's less than
seven.
yeah, I think water is 7. So like when the pH is less than 7, DMT is acidic, right? And they call that a salt form, and that's quite stable. and it's better for orally active versions of DMT.
Mm-hmm.
And when the pH is above 7, it's in its free base form, and it's known as a free base DMT, and that's better for smoking and vaporizing and stuff like that. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to be vaporizing it in its salt form, okay, because it's bad for your lungs. But what they've discovered is it has a peculiar uh, uh, property to it where if DMT is in its salt form, acidic, it actually is hydrophilic. It will move into water, and then you can cook it into a tea, similar to ayahuasca, right? Ayahuasca, it's already in its tannin form, tannic acid form, and therefore it can sort of be cooked into a tea. Now, once it's been cooked into a tea, they found that you can basify it, and using something like sodium hydroxide, and then it would turn into its free base form. And when it's in its free base form, it's not hydrophilic anymore; it's hydrophobic. Okay, and that means it crashes out of solution. It turns into like a milky looking water, because the crystals are actually crashing out of solution.
Mm-hmm.
And what you can do then is you can add your solvent, and that the DMT has an affinity for. It's called a non-polar solvent, and the DMT will move into that solvent. And because the solvent is non-polar, that means it floats on top of water, and you can separate it off. It's not miscible. It doesn't mix with the water, right?
Yeah.
And so once you've got your DMT in the solvent, then depending on the solvent, there's a couple of ways to get it back out, whether you're drying off, like evaporating the solvent, or whether you're cooling the solvent. And certain solvents, when you cool them, the DMT doesn't want to be in there anymore, and it crashes out of solution as well,
Right.
and it'll stick to the outside of the jar, and just sort of like,
Yeah.
then you can just pour off the solvent while it's cold, and it'll just stick to the jar, kind of thing.
I see. With
Um,
with how you're saying it, like you're calling it ayahuasca, but like I was always used to the term tryptamine. Like whenever you use ayahuasca, it has tryptamine inside of it. You see what I mean? And it's a
so
precursor to DMT. So, like
yes,
there's
yes,
there's a difference between ayahuasca slash tryptamine and DMT. You know what I'm saying?
yes,
So,
yes. Even though DMT contains tryptamine, it's there's a huge difference between the two things, right?
right.
Even though they're like only a few atoms different. Uh, but tryptamine is very common, actually. It's
Yeah.
like it's in our diets, it's in our bodies, and that's why they actually call DMT an endogenous psychedelic, because there are these biosynthetic pathways in the body where DMT is produced. And so they found out that tryptamine can actually be turned into DMT with these certain enzymes called indole methyltransferase. Indole ethylamine N methyltransferase, INMT.
Hmm.
Okay, this is a really interesting area of research that hasn't been pushed far enough yet, actually, because I found out that if you took that enzyme and you put it in a bacteria, or in like a mushroom, you could actually produce DMT by feeding it tryptamine. And yeah, so like this is something I would like to experiment with one day, and it'd be interesting if we could just like create a little bioreactor.
But yeah, now also
um,
what I've also found out is like the reaction leading to DMT is just a simple reductive animation. And that's where two hydrogen atoms on a nitrogen of tryptamine are replaced by two methyl groups, which is the CH3. Okay, that's
yeah,
the CH3 that I was talking about.
yeah.
Now,
That's what this enzyme does. It adds the methyl groups on.
okay,
Yeah.
now with tryptamine, now that oxidizes pretty easy, and it's like I was saying, you can find it pretty much on any pharmaceutical shelf too, or you can find it in trees or pretty much anywhere. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like you were just explaining, that's what I was going through right there. So, and
Yeah, yeah.
now I was told that it needs to be or it needs to be recrystallized, and they do that by boiling heptane or hexane with it.
Well, yes. Wow, good work, Roger, with your research. Yes, that's something that actually a lot of people don't do, and that's why it's not a good idea, in my opinion, to just smoke random people's DMT because there's a lot of like bad chemists out there. They're not even chemists; they're just big backyard chemists that don't know what they're doing, and they don't end up cleaning up their DMT, and you end up with all sorts of unwanted things in there, and it can be harsh on your lungs or potentially dangerous. So like, yeah, it's better to either do it yourself or like to really like get it from a friend or someone that you, or like at least question them about their practices and stuff like that. Like it's actually better to do it yourself because
Mm-hmm.
then you know what's going on. But so what when you have the DMT in the solvent like we're talking about and you've crashed it out into solution, out of the solution into a crystal, it might still have other alkaloids or other oils in
Mm-hmm.
there, right? And at that stage, you could do a recrystallization to further purify it. And that will remove stuff like NMT, 5-MeO DMT, and a whole bunch of unknown other, what we call jungle alkaloids that are also in various plants, that hasn't been documented yet.
Okay.
So each plant has a slightly different character to it in terms of the alkaloid profile.
Now you're talking about reduction agents, right?
No, not necessarily. Reduction agents.
Like stab.
Is acid a reduction agent?
Yeah. Like, have you ever heard of stab?
Uh, it rings a bell, but I can't remember what it is.
It's a sodium cyaborahide or something like that. Borahydride.
Okay,
And
but
then there's another one. It's called sodium triacetoxaborahydride, and they
okay, what do you do with it?
you use
Sounds
it.
complicated.
You use it to. It's a reducing agent where you go in and it cleans everything out and everything. And like methanol is
Mhm.
one thing that they were always talking about. Like people would actually use formaldehyde to some points where they would actually use formaldehyde for the methanol and everything, and for the reducing agents that go into uh, basically cleaning it up, like you were talking about. You know?
Man, that sounds mega complicated.
Yeah.
That must be chemists that were doing that, not fucking backyard chemists.
Yeah. Well,
uh,
m- most
send me
of
that
most of the
send
stuff
me that
that
paper because I'm interested. But I can tell you how, like, the psychedelic community people do it. They don't, they don't do it necessarily how the chemists do it these days. There's a lot easier ways to do these things.
hmm
Um,
Now,
And
a lot of these guys that I did it to, they were like, one of them went on to a board. He was really popular. It was called Science Madness, and like they would do experiments and shit and get all freaking sciencey with it and everything. So um,
mm,
that's the one place I went to, and I don't know if you've ever heard of um, what was it? Oh shit, I put Arrowwood. I think yeah,
I know Arrowwood. Yeah,
yeah, Arrowwood.
yeah, right.
They
Oh,
have a
cool.
lot of information on there too. So
Yeah, no, that's a good one actually. This is another one I want to point out for people is
the,
DMT Nexus. This is how I got started, and this is a massive. This is like the Bible of DMT. You know, this website. Like people have been contributing knowledge and experimentation here for like 20 years plus,
mm,
and all the techniques and tools and everything you need is in there. So like, if you ever want to, if anyone's like mega interested in learning themselves for spiritual reasons or whatever, go have a look in there. Um,
now
and
the Science Madness one is actually on the art of science. No, the art and science of amateur experimentalism. So that's
Arrowwood is really good for like understanding drugs in general, and like this, it should always be your first point of call before you take a drug. You know, like go on Arrowwood, look at the dosages, look at the safety, you know, and it'll tell you, you know, everything you need to know on how to take something safely. Okay, and don't ever take something without knowing what it is. For example, DMT is here. Go in there. You go in here. You go. You probably stay away from the law section and go straight to the section.
what's wrong with the law section?
It'll just make you paranoid. Don't worry about
It just make you paranoid.
it. So here's the common dosage for DMT. Now, mind you, this is pure DMT that's been recrystallized. You know, like that'll give you a breakthrough dose, about 30 milligrams. A strong dose, you know, 50 milligrams. Um, I tend to overshoot rather than undershoot, you know, because
Hmm.
you can when you start to have it, you tend to fuck it up a lot of the times because you start tripping out before you've actually finished the dose, the pipe. So,
And
and I'd like to talk a little bit
a lot of people. Well, actually, I think I messed up on my last college comment whenever I was talking about the reduction. The reduction is the methanol. They were talking about the reduction in the breakdown whenever freaking you go through the cooling process. They say you'll lose a lot in the cook. You know what I mean? When you're actually doing it
Yes,
because of
yes.
evaporation.
So, like, you don't want to add too much acid to the tea when you're cooking it. You can break down the DMT that way. If you,
Hmm.
like, for example, if you add hydrochloric acid, okay, you don't want to have it go really, really low pH because if you're cooking DMT at a really low pH, it can break down some of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah. See,
good, good
I
point.
apologize about that. I got confused there for a second.
Yeah. No. No, that's a good point. That's a good point. I tend to forget that actually.
I,
Um
and like
uh
the stab is what they use for that to try to uh, prevent as much of it as possible. And I guess they say like that's why they started uh, using the formaldehyde. And for me, I think that's insanity because like you know
yeah, I don't know. I've tried to look it up and I couldn't find anything about formaldehyde. That sounds crazy to me.
uh, I believe the article I had was DMT and for formaldehyde, just straight up DMT and formaldehyde.
What for? Like,
Well,
why?
it it's a replacement for a lot of the stuff that they use methanol for whenever they're doing it, and for the
Is it to preserve it, or what are they trying to do with
it's to
formaldehyde?
lower the it's a reducing agent basically to lower the amount that's lost whenever you're doing the recipe. And
Oh, okay.
so
Meh.
don't get me wrong. I mean, there's a lot of similarities between tryptamine and freaking formaldehyde. All right, but like you mess up on formaldehyde, you can take small doses of it, but if you mess up on that with too much, it can kill you. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, I prefer to use really safe compounds, stuff that won't kill you
yeah.
if you don't mess up. Um, you know, naphthalene as the solvent or is a good starting point. Sodium hydroxide. Um, for the acid, you can use if you're doing a big batch, you can use hydrochloric acid, but it needs to be pure and don't use too much of it. You really got to do your research well on. I think it's like been a long time, but I think it's like 10% um, um, uh, of 10% concentration of the hydrochloric acid. But yeah, you don't want it to go too low. Otherwise, if you want to be safe, just use citric acid. Citric acid, you can't mess it up. It goes down to the right amount of pH. It can't go lower. It's not bad for your skin. It's really nice acid to use. I recommend it.
Okay.
A little bit more expensive, but it's nice to use.
So since we're already into it, tell us a little bit about what you know about heptane and hexane.
All right. Well, this is actually a little bit of a trade secret. I don't usually talk about this,
Poor guy.
but I'll make an exception for you.
Okay.
Um, Hexane is good at, at recrystallization, but only at high temperatures, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
makes it a bit of a finicky thing. Heptane is better, all right, but it's much harder to get. Um, it's a, it's a controlled kind of, certain chemists can get it for you, but it's
Mm-hmm.
really, really good. It's really, really good for cleaning up DMT because all you have to do is like dissolve the DMT with a slight heat in the heptane, and then just let it come down to room temperature. You don't even have to cool it. At room temperature, it'll just crash out of solution and be super super clean. Um, Whereas with hexane, you have to like freeze it. You're gonna have to heat it and then freeze it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a bit of a hassle. Um, so yeah, that's the secret. And if you can get it that clean, if you do the recrystallization, you get it mega clean. You can put it in a vape pen with pure vegetable glycerin. Get some organic vegetable glycerin and let it sort of sit in there. Like first crush it real fine, put it in the vegetable glycerin, add a little bit of fruit flavor or something like that. Let it sit for like 2 weeks, and then you've got like really nice vape juice. And yeah, you can go into museums and stuff and like just really experience them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So with that, that's pretty much a lot of what I wanted to go through with the chemical part of it. So like I you know, and I hope frickin' Vince and them sees this and they frickin' figure out they were suckers because I didn't say anything critical, did I? Whatsoever.
No,
Right? See?
not that I can. No.
And I think that's what they were expecting because that's why they didn't want to mention nothing or show up because freaking they think I was going to be critical about it. You know, the only issue I had was with the formaldehyde, and that was it. And I mean,
Yeah, good.
from what
Yeah,
I
that's
take,
what I had an issue with that too.
you know, I think that's the only thing that really flipped me out. You know what I mean? Because like, um,
Here's a really cool thing that they found like certain like DMT, LSD, psilocybin, and DOI. All of them release nerve growth factor when you have them,
uh-huh.
and it's actually got a neuroprotective effect, which
Mhm.
is interesting new research coming out. I've just it's been a while since I've looked at DMT research, but there's some interesting new things coming out nowadays. Yeah.
So, I did tell you that I wanted to talk about serotonin levels and dopamine levels. So,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um,
DMT actually doesn't activate dopamine very much. It does a small amount of 5-HT2A, which is your classic serotonin hallucinogenic serotonin. Okay,
mhm,
because there's not just one type of serotonin. There's an ocean of different types of serotonin. They all have slightly different receptor site affinities. Um, but the big thing for DMT is it's an NMDA receptor antagonist. Okay,
mhm,
similar to ketamine, and it actually that is probably how like a large part of its mechanism. But there's a few other things like I was trying to find the paper on it before. I couldn't find it in time for this, but it's something like a MAP4 receptor. There's new things being discovered all the time about it. You know, we don't fully understand it by far,
yeah.
so it's still under investigation for sure. The mechanism of action. I find it very interesting for sure.
Now, I have found out that when they say like when it comes to serotonin and drug use and addiction, like it's a
Mm.
it's a it's a freaking myth or it's not valid that serotonin levels are affected. You know what I mean? Because of it. So,
So the important thing to realize is because it doesn't like and this isn't just DMT. This is psychedelics in general, bar
well,
except maybe
any drugs is what I'm saying. It like it doesn't affect the serotonin levels to where they drop or become,
um
you know what I mean, like that. So,
yeah. So like okay, I'll explain it in the way that I kind of understand it. Okay.
okay.
Um, so there's a spectrum of let's just talk about psychedelics for now. All right, there's a spectrum of psychedelics. You got your on the one hand, you got your stimulating psychedelics, and on the other hand, you've got your um, uh, dissociative psychedelics. All right, and then within the those two sides, there's a blend of all these different ones, right? So, for example, the stimulating psychedelics would be, for example, cactus, like mescaline, you know,
Mhm.
and part of that family would be MDMA, you know, and MDMA is also part of, like, say, for example, an amphetamine family. Okay, that's what the M in MDMA stands for.
Yeah.
um, but it is that those stimulating types of psychedelics actually do deplete your neurotransmitters to a degree, and you do feel a bit drained the next day, and you need to like look after yourself. You know, it's better not to drink on them because they do tax your body a bit. It's good to have sleep afterwards and good food, something like that, right? You want to like boost your body back up afterwards. Whereas then you got your sort of neutral psychedelics like DMT, mushrooms, LSD. They don't actually tax your body that hard. I don't know why. They do hit your serotonin receptor sites, and if you retake, especially LSD, for example, a few days in a row, you will notice that it will be much, much less effective. You'll get tolerant to it like mega quick, because it does shave off those receptor sites by hitting them so hard. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's because it keeps people in check. It keeps people honest. You don't want people abusing this stuff by taking it every day like it's coffee or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's the beauty of these types of psychedelics is uh, you can't take it every day because it will do absolutely nothing by the end of the week. So people have to learn how to use it in moderation and stuff. The other side of that is it doesn't release a lot of dopamine. The stimulating psychedelics do. MDMA, cactus, that kind of stuff does release a bit of dopamine, and that can be not so much cactus because it does make you a bit queasy, so that isn't habit forming. But MDMA can be habit forming, for example, because of that dopamine release. Whereas with LSD and DMT and mushrooms, that they don't release a lot of dopamine, so they aren't actually habit forming. You take it and you feel fine. You're just like, I've had enough. I don't need it anymore. Like yeah, it's just you don't get cravings from it. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas on the other side of the spectrum, on the dissociative side, you've got like say ketamine and PCP, that kind of stuff. Um, that can be habit forming, but I'm not sure if it's because of dopamine or not. I don't quite understand why it's habit forming yet. I think it does release a little bit of dopamine,
I believe
but
from my what I've read up on it, like it's and a lot of people like to say it's the serotonin, but I've been finding that it's more of the dopamine. And
yeah, no, it's definitely the dopamine. I can feel that,
you
Uh,
know,
I'm
um,
like a connoisseur with these things, and I can feel which neurotransmitters being released because I've taken like so many different things that like like even pharmaceuticals that are like dopamine reuptake inhibitors, for example. And then I know, oh, that's what dopamine feels like. Oh, this is what serotonin feels like. You get to know the different sensations, and yeah, I mean, the dopamine is the one thing you want to keep in balance in your system, right? Because it's
mhm.
it's the driving force of your brain. Okay, and I treat dopamine like I treat like a pet animal. Like I love them, but at the same time, I want to keep them under my control because if you let your dog, for example, get out of control, it can go and hurt someone. Like
Yeah.
uh, I always like try to rein in my cravings whenever I notice that they start acting up. Like if I have too much coffee, I'll start to reduce my intake, or I'll take a little break or something like that, just to get my cravings back under control. Because you once you go down that rabbit hole of getting your cravings too far out of control, it requires a lot more effort to get them back in control. And this has got to do with the way that the dopamine nerves work. They actually act like a muscle almost in the brain. The more they fire off, the bigger they get, and the
Mhm.
more easily they fire off. So the only way to counteract that is to stop them from firing off, and then they will shrink down and become less active. And you want them to be in that neutral space where they're not too active and they're not active enough. You
Mhm.
just want that perfect equilibrium with your dopamine levels because then your mind isn't seeking all the time for something to fill that spot.
Yeah,
You
because
know, that
you
goes
get
crazy.
you got to remember like freaking cocaine and substances like that. These are freaking like blockers. You know what I mean? They're dopamine transporter blockers. They block them. So
Mm,
uh, for
mm,
the because it's an uptake inhibitors. You know what I'm saying? That's
mm.
that's what it basically is. So like every time you're taking cocaine or you're taking some kind of psychostimulant, you're actually uh, it's causing a they're dopamine blockers. You know what I'm saying? So naturally, when the dopamine in your body is
I
supposed
think
to
I think it's
make you
a
feel,
dopamine reuptake blocker.
yeah,
It releases dopamine, but it also blocks the reuptake of it. So you
or
got more dopamine in the synapse, like floating around, right?
in common language, like like okay, when you're with a woman, you know what I'm saying, and you're freaking kissing and making out and having sex, even, you know what I mean. Your dopamine is being released naturally. Okay,
Oh shit, yeah.
you know what I'm saying. So, but when you're taking cocaine,
Women should be illegal. They're so good.
but when you're taking cocaine and you're with a woman and you haven't done cocaine, those inhibitors are being blocked. You see what I mean? Like the result, that natural phenomenon that you're supposed to be feeling when you're with a woman
Yes.
isn't going to be responding. Now, if you had cocaine and a woman, bam, you're on cloud nine.
I've got another way I can describe it for you. So, like, the reason that a drug works is because of the drug and the receptor, right,
Uh
on
huh.
your nerve. On the one end of your nerve, you've got your axon, uh, where the nerve terminal is, right? And it's like these little finger projections. On each of those little finger projections, you've got your um, your your sites, your what do I call them? Uh, uh, I'm having a brain blank now.
Having a brain
These,
fart. That's a fart.
yeah,
Brain fart.
you know, you've got your receptor sites. That's what I'm looking for. The word
There
I'm
you
looking
go.
for. You got your receptor sites on these like finger like nerve axons, right?
Hmm.
And when you take a drug, uh, I wish I could show you this on video so you can have a visual of it. But imagine like you've got your two hands in front of you, right, with your fingers pointing at each other, right? That's
Hmm.
kind of how nerves look, okay? And that gap between your hands is called the nerve junction or the neural junction, okay? And that's where the drugs, the neurochemicals get released, okay, in
Hmm.
the synapse, okay. And when this is where the drugs also have their effect, okay. So let's say you're having something like cocaine. It will release dopamine into the synapse between your two hands, and it will be hit. It will attach to the receptor sites of that dopamine receptor, right?
Hmm.
There's a few different types of dopamine receptors, but what then happens is the dopamine gets taken back up into the axon, into the finger, to be released again next time, right?
Hmm.
That either happens or it gets broken down by something like that monoamine oxidase. All right,
Hmm.
but what happens is if you have the dopamine lingering around, like if you take cocaine, that it blocks the reuptake of the dopamine into the axon, and therefore it lingers around in the synapse for longer, having a greater effect, right? And then that actually sends a signal to your system which says, "Oh shit, I've got too much fucking dopamine." And what happens is your body actually stops coding for these dopamine receptors, and it'll reduce the amount of active dopamine receptors on the synapses,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore I call it shaving off those receptor sites. Okay, think of it because it's been hit so much, and then because you've taken all this, you know, dopamine releasing substances, you um,
Well,
you have less.
for me,
Well,
I've found that at that stage you become dependent on the chemical, the drug that you're using.
yes. Well, dopamine is actually a bad example for this because dopamine uh, it bounces back more. Like the more you have it, the more it wants. You know, like whereas with other neurochemicals uh, like adrenaline, serotonin, and stuff like that, you actually when you shave them off, um, they don't come back as quickly. For example, if you drink coffee every day, caffeine, right? Caffeine is an amine as well, right?
Yeah.
Um, and every day that releases adrenaline, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you have that every day, what happens? It shaves off some of those adrenaline receptor sites. Even though you have the same amount of coffee every day, you don't feel as hyped up as you did a few days ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because now you need 2 shots of coffee to feel that buzz. And all of a sudden you need 4 shots. And it's because there's less receptor sites in on those synaptic terminals on those finger-like projections in your nerves. There's less of those receptor sites, and
Now that we've gotten to this point, though, I want to ask you something. Now, I've
mm,
I've I've also heard that like when you stop taking the drug, whether it be coffee or cocaine, okay, that the the dopamine has to reroute itself in order to freaking uh, in order for you to feel the natural dopamine effects of just everyday freaking enjoying just everyday things naturally. You know what I'm saying? Like
mhm, mhm.
I've heard that these receptors have been damaged. So what the dopamine does is it has to reroute itself in order to feel those same sensations that you're supposed to feel naturally. So what's your
So
go ahead?
what I think happens is it's just it's it was just out of balance, you know, like the amount of receptors versus dopamine was just out of balance. And then when you get your dopamine from an external source, your body stops producing it to in order to balance it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's called equilibrium.
There you go.
Okay, your brain is always trying to find an equilibrium point where everything is steady. Okay, and if you start taking something that releases a lot of nicotine, for example, then your brain will produce less nicotine and to make up for it. You know, if you then take that away, your brain then craves nicotine. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that's all got to do with the amount of receptor sites that the brain produces in order to maintain a balance of the in the force, which is called the equilibrium. Okay, and it's the same with dopamine. If you you know, and I'll show you an example of this. Um, like, let's say someone is quitting, you know, drinking alcohol or something like that, or smoking cigarettes. Um, what happens? They take up another addiction, right? Like something
Usually,
else.
yeah.
They'll
Replace one
switch to
addiction with
something else.
another.
Yes. because because they are that the other thing also releases dopamine, right?
Hmm.
And it's not so much that they're addicted to the cigarettes, it's more that they're actually trying to balance their dopamine levels. And so,
So now you're getting
based
into
on
the
that
serious
understanding,
stuff. See, now you're getting
but
into the serious stuff. So it doesn't
based on that
matter.
understanding,
It doesn't matter if it's cocaine or a candy bar. That's the process that's taking place, right?
that's right. It doesn't matter whether it's sugar or cocaine, it all releases dopamine. It all feeds back into the dopamine pathway, right?
There you go.
That's your motivational drive in your brain for procreation, for everything. That's why it's so important to keep that healthy and balanced because if it gets out of whack, you will become psychotic or you will become just like flapping in the wind, like it's very very difficult to maintain a steady brain if your dopamine levels are out of control.
I
um
like to call the term apathy. You develop apathy where you don't yeah, you know what I'm saying? It's like what the fuck, who cares, you know what I mean?
can be, yeah, yeah,
You know what I
yeah.
mean?
All sorts of things.
So,
But so, like, based on this understanding, right, I've come up with this technique that I use. I call it addiction yoga, where you basically, I'll show you here. Um, You make a list, addiction yoga, and in the list I'll have all the things that I'm addicted to. It might be like coffee, um,
pretty girls,
beer. Oh yeah, I'll put girls in there.
no, pretty girls,
Girls.
raves,
Uh, weed. Um, what else? What else is in there? Let's start with this for example for now.
okay.
Okay. Um, what you do is you write down all your addictions or all the things you feel cravings for. Okay.
Hmm.
These are all the things that release dopamine in your brain. Okay. Now you have to ask yourself, which one do I care about the most, and which one do I care about the least? And you reorganize this list. Let's say, okay, you know, uh,
Of course. Now
girls are pretty low.
you know the girls go to the top. Come on, don't play that.
It probably be more like this, for me. And
Yeah, right.
and well,
I know you off stream,
actually,
so
no, that's not true.
yeah.
That's not true. Uh,
Well,
beer. Let's
girls
let's put
would
it on
girls
beer
would
on the
be at
bottom.
least above coffee, dude. Seriously, I mean,
Oh, it's hard to say.
yeah, that's a tough call,
Anyway,
I guess. Yeah, you're right. It's a tough
the
call.
thing is, it's easy to wean off girls. It's hard to wean off coffee.
Yeah, it really is. You're right about that. It really is.
So let's get rid of girls altogether.
You
Um,
just
um,
said that out loud too.
so here's the thing. Um, you want to get rid of the thing you care about the least first. All right.
Hmm.
That's that's why I got rid of the girls.
Okay.
No, I'm just joking. I'm just joking. But seriously though, the one that you care about the least is the one that releases the least amount of dopamine, right?
Uh-huh.
So, like, if you flick that one first, let's say it's beer, all right, then you your dopamine pathway is very slightly shrinking at this stage, right? Not doing a big shrink, a big jump. It's doing a small neurological jump. Okay. And because when you do the big neurological jumps by quitting, like let's say your big addictions like nicotine or something like that, then your brain will start fighting you too hard,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll start getting withdrawals and stuff like that. Yeah. And so you end up you go for the big one, the small ones first. Okay, that's
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying. And then you might toss up between, you know, coffee and weed. Coffee and weed. I would get rid of weed because coffee makes me douchey.
Yeah, I mean, drink that coffee,
and
man.
then you'll find yourself, your energy will pick up, your cravings will reduce after about a week or two, and now you're feeling much more confident. You're like, wow. But what have you found?
Yeah.
You're starting to take a lot more coffee than you usually do. And the reason for that is because you're compensating for the amount of dopamine that you used to get from all those other things,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
But now you stacked it all onto coffee, all right? So you're having like four double shots a day,
Mm-hmm.
and what you do is that you just reduce that by one each day, uh, each couple of days, whatever feels right for you, until you can go, you know what? I'm going to try not drinking coffee for a week. I'm just going to drink tea. And then after you have some tea for a week, you can go, I'm going to see if I can just stop tea. Bam. And now you're in a really really good spot to actually just get rid of your really big addiction and not feel it too much. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
That's how addiction yoga works. It works according to the processes of your nervous system. So,
That's
good luck
pretty
with that,
good.
guys.
Now we've made it to an hour and 7 minutes. So before we go, I want you to give a plug on yourself and tell everybody about your cool stuff. Like,
Oh yeah, I mainly just want people to join us in on minds.com. We've got a psychedelic research group there.
mm-hmm.
Um, Let me get it up on the screen quickly.
You posted links to it. I know that much.
Yeah,
You had a few
here it is.
chats. Yeah, there you go. You gotta switch it over to that. There you go.
So we've got this entheogenic portal on minds.com. This is mainly around plant-based psychedelics, like we were talking about. This is a psychedelic research group, which is more about the nitty-gritty, sciencey stuff around psychedelics and all the latest research. But this chat room is also our psychedelics chat room where we talk about books and all sorts of art and cool shit that all things psychedelics. So yeah, feel free to come join us on minds.com, and we can push the envelope further with chatting about psychedelics.
Now, see, whenever I say give a plug, it doesn't say that you. I'm not saying that you don't have to, like everything. You know what I mean? Just things that relate to what you want to bring up. This is a perfect example of it. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Let people know about this. That way, they know that they can come here to check out information on psychedelics and everything of that nature. So,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we can talk more about the DMT experience itself another time. This is more like a, I guess, technical discussion.
Yeah,
uh,
I figured you would have more time, but you ran your mouth too long, so you screwed up.
yeah, I guess so.
Man,
But I mean,
but
there's a lot
you
to say
believe it
about
or
it. I
not,
could talk
yeah, yeah, you actually said a lot, dude. Like we actually had a pretty good conversation here. I mean, really,
yeah,
we did, and it was a serious one. It wasn't crazy, Which
yeah,
I'm talking about, like people like to argue and stuff about this stuff, and no, we actually had a serious conversation.
yeah.
You
And
know,
I liked it. It was really, really nice.
I did too.
Appreciate it, man. I'm impressed actually with your knowledge, so it's good. I'll send you some DMT one day.
No, I learned most of this stuff from sobering up, from all the cool stuff that you do now. So, and I did do the research on the DMT though. I started noticing that a lot of people
Have
bring it
you have
up.
you listened to some of Terence McKenna's talks
Yeah,
from the old days?
Terrence McKenna is always high. I've never saw one video that he did where he wasn't high. And anybody who tells me he was sober or out
I
of
think he was sober, man. I think that was just what it
everybody
was
says
like.
that, dude. Come on, Terry McKenna was high. You have to be a drug addict to recognize that.
Nah, I
Yes,
don't think he was, man. I don't think he was.
Terry.
Like, because he was mainly into psychedelics, right? He didn't smoke
He
weed really.
Well,
That
he was the beginning of it. Like
yeah,
he's the one who started. Well, don't get me wrong.
but,
There were
but man,
professors in
he couldn't he
universities.
couldn't hold his own on those talks he did if he was on
Oh
it on
yes, he
something.
could. Terrence McKinney could have freaking smoked a tree, dude. Seriously.
Nah,
Yeah.
well, he might have been on acid on some of them, maybe, but I don't think he was like. I don't. I've never seen him high that I can remember.
And
He mainly just explains what it is like to be high, and
like everybody takes pot shots at that one guy who's always painting. What's his name? He's always the one on there doing the painting and being real nice and friendly and everything. What's his name?
uh,
Um, the guy with the
on where
fluffy hair. You remember him?
on
The art guy.
on Terence McKenna's talks.
No,
Is that what you're talking
he does paintings where he sits and he's all.
about?
You remember him?
Yeah, yeah. The painter guy. What is his name? I don't know.
Now, I'm sorry to break the bubble, but that dude was high too. Every freaking time he was ever on TV, the dude was high. I mean, seriously, like always high. You can always tell when somebody's been high, okay, or when they're high, I should say, if you do it. And I'm telling you right now, that dude was high. All right.
Oh fuck! I'm high right now, man. So.
I I I don't know if I will ever freaking hear you sober, dude. Like in any conversation we've had.
This is me, this cat. This is what I
But I guess we can end this, and we will get back to this another time. This is the kind of stuff I wanted to bring up in my Into the Abyss conversation. You know what I mean? And then like
Very cool.
the spiritual stuff. I can bring that
We
up
haven't
too.
even jumped into the abyss yet. We're just on the edge of it now. You
Oh,
know,
you're
we're just
just you're
we're
you're
just chatting
just
about it.
you're just explaining the basics, okay? It's just like whenever Vince and them was on, I had them talking about philosophy and Pythagoras and stuff like that, and they said the same thing. Oh, we're just starting. I'm like, yeah, we are. We are just starting, dude. It's like this is just the tip of the iceberg. So,
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I'm getting a few more of my friends into this streaming thing, so there's going to be a lot more to come. We should start our own network. You
yeah,
know.
really, we should. And you're big on that doof thing, so that's another thing to think of too. Get
Yeah,
it?
man. Like that's where we're pushing it. That's what we want. Sustainable communities. We want to grow like these medicines as well, man. Like that's how I got started in this scene is like just growing all these plants myself and experimenting, and I would love to see like the community come together and grow these medicines for humanity's sake, because it really is healing stuff. It like expands your mind, broadens your horizons, all those cliches. It really, really does do it. And once you've had that, you won't need religion ever again. Just kidding, just kidding. But but
With that,
the
I am going to just end it right there and say I've always enjoyed freaking having conversations with you and talking about stuff. So uh, don't ever think I don't, because I love doing it. So just
uh, love talking to you too, brother. Talk to you soon.
all right, man.
Peace.
Peace.